From deep, deep in outer space to planet Earth to the red rocks of Sedona comes a time, an event, a place, a message of making contact.
There is no better time for a book like Making Contact. I'm George Noory, host of the national radio show Coast to Coast AM. Alan Steinfeld has put together a well-conceived collection of writings that covers it all. This is a book most needed at this time because Making Contact presents the opportunity for us to prepare to meet advanced civilizations. Someday, somehow in the future, the conflicts that have plagued our species for eons will come to an end. And by making contact, we will take our rightful place among the stars.
We are very honored to welcome you to Unity of Sedona. My name is Dosie. I just want to say that Alan Steinfeld is the founder of New Realities, as most of you know, and has been coming to Sedona for his energy tune-up since 1983. Most of us just stay here because we deplete as fast as we tune it up. Now, Alan has been obsessed with ET since 1987, and most of us are ETs. But this week, Amazon recognized his book as the #1 on their new releases. Now, Alan came to Sedona because, as most of us know already, Sedona is ground zero for ET activity. And the world is starting to realize this also. And it is my great honor to introduce to you Alan Steinfeld.
Thank you. I feel like it's the Oscars or something, or maybe my bar mitzvah. But I am really excited to be here in Sedona. I thought it would be the perfect place to start making contact, because that's why we're all here, right? Because we're here for a major event. We are in the middle of a total shift in consciousness, in awakening, in possibilities. And the red rocks are energizing us to start to open doorways to new realities. That's been my tagline, new realities. So, yeah, I love Sedona. I love just being here. I'll just tell you a quick story. When I first got here, first time in 1983, I just would put all the red dirt all over me and I decided to take a suitcase full of red Sedona dirt back to New York. Really, and I would fill up this little box and just stand in the red dirt, and I felt like I was back in Sedona until my cat, really, my cat noticed, well, that looked like a great little box, and that kind of ruined the experience for me. So, really, that's a true story. I've had to come back to Sedona every year just for that renewal, I guess. So, I'm really happy about this book. This book is a collection. It's not just my story. It's a collection of my 11 favorite people in the UFO field, giving a multiplicity of viewpoints, because you ask anyone what's going on, especially the government. The government that's why they're panicking now, because, disclosure's coming in June, and they don't know what to say because they don't understand what's going on. We understand it more. This is what Grant Cameron says in my book. He says, don't talk to the people in charge, talk to the contactees. They will tell you what's happening. So, right, so here we are. I'm just going to screen share my screen there. Let's just see right there. Oh, there's the book with a quote by J.J. Hurtak and Desiree Hurtak, but Let me see, I have some other people I put up there. Let's see. That is Deepak Chopra, who doesn't buy any of this stuff, but I did say to him, Deepak, this is really about consciousness. And he said, well, consciousness is everywhere. But I said, Deepak, this is an expansion of consciousness. What we know of consciousness is just limited to the human field. Consciousness goes beyond this planet. It goes beyond who we think we are, and life is an emergent property of creation. He said, okay, be on my Sirius radio show. And so I was on the Sirius radio show, and we've done a lot of shows together. This is the opening quote. There's one thing stronger than all the armies in the world. That is an idea whose time has come. That's our time now. It really is. All of us. We are all here because making contact, we're on the threshold of something new and in a way something imaginable, something beyond belief. So for many years I was doing a show called New Realities. I said, if you don't create your reality, one will be created for you. We have to go through this little time warp and open our minds to something bigger, more expansive, more than possible. So I've asked 11 of the best UFO researchers, and I'm just going to outline this book because I wanted you to know what you're getting, because, it's a multiplicity of perspectives. Like I said, no one has the whole story. Steve Bassett gave me a nice endorsement. Amika Swami, the physicist. We're about to meet a bigger reality. We're about to jump into a bigger fish tank, right? That's it. Or more populations. We're realizing there's more there. Civilization is a race between education and catastrophe. Let us learn the truth and spread it far and wide as our circumstances allow, for truth is the greatest weapon we have. That is why the government is folding in its way of holding on, because there's too much of us out there now. There's too much contact. Contact is increasing worldwide. It's been on the news. It's been in the New York Times. So something is about to give way. I do have some great recordings of people who kind of contribute to this book. People like Nick Pope, who's a real insider. Nick works for the government or worked for the British Defense, and he kind of kicks off the book by saying he's the villain. He's the person no one wants to talk to because he's inside the government. He doesn't want to reveal those secrets. I ask him all the time, what can't you tell us? And he, no, really, he won't, no, because he's still sworn to secrecy, even though it's been years since he's been working for the government. He cannot allow himself to share the truth, but he does say that the government is sort of opening up to these possibilities.
It seeks to be an insider's view on the phenomenon in terms of policy and investigation. In other words, everyone has views about UFOs. Some people come to it as a witness or through an experience. Others come to it because it's a passion of theirs and something they've looked at in a sort of private capacity, put a lot of their life into. But there's a small group of people who've looked at this in a slightly different way from within government, whether it's government, the military, or the intelligence community. And it's not necessarily a popular view. And I think we joked about this, and I started off my chapter. I don't know if this line survived the edit, but I said something like, every story needs a villain, and I might be it.
It did survive because I thought that was a great way to start a narrative with the villains talking, but you're not really the villain in that sense.
Well, thank you. And in any case, in many, many movies, the villains are the far more interesting characters anyway. So slightly different view than I. And I knew that your sort of, big enough personality to take a little bit of dissent and variation. So I give it to you and to readers really in a different way through the lens of government, telling people how those of us on the inside view this. And it's not necessarily going to endear me to people, particularly in the New Age and spiritual community. But as I said somewhere, it is what it is.
Right. No, I think actually your dissent or your perspective is very important, because this is what we're dealing with in disclosure, sort of that government point of view. But also, I wanted everyone to have their own opinion, because no one really knows what this phenomena is about. And I thought if we got enough varied opinions, the reader could put together their own sense of it. Does that make sense to you? You know?
Yes, it does. None of us own this subject.
Mm-hmm.
None of us sits as final arbiter on this. Certainly not government. I'm not one of these people, far from it. And I think I get into this in the chapter somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
I say, ironically, those of us in government are sometimes far less certain about this, less
Right.
equivocal in our views than many people in the UFO community. Many, many times I sat down with colleagues and said, look, we simply don't know, our honest opinions. So that's right. None of us is judge, jury, and certainly not executioner on this. And everybody's view is as valid as everybody else's. And that's what I think so great about your book, that you've got these diverse voices with different backgrounds, different experiences, different areas of specialism, and different opinions.
Nick writes the first chapter about government insiders, and then Grant Cameron says, and like Travis says, he says, if you see a UFO, you were meant to see it. You're part of it. You're part of the whole ball game, and there are no innocent bystanders.
I call it the theory of wow, because the more I look at the phenomena, the more it looks like whatever we're dealing with just wants you to go, wow. It's all about messaging. You start to wonder what's really going on, except that they are putting out messages. The second night I had a UFO sighting in 1975, I remember watching the thing fly away, and I said to myself, so what's it doing? It wasn't doing anything. So now when I ask people about UFO sightings, the first question I ask them is, I say, so what was it doing? And they usually say the same thing. It wasn't doing anything. It was just there. And this is the whole idea. Why do UFOs have lights on them? Why do they take the blood out of the cow? Why do they leave crop circles? Why do they drop ports? Why do they drop pieces of metal that make us go like, what is going on here with weird isotopes? It's the question is, are they actually coming across the universe to mutilate cows, to mess around with, have little pieces fall off the flying saucer, to put lights on crafts? Or is this all to wake us up, to get us to realize something is going on? It's not quite the world you really think it is. Right. And so the more I look at it, the more it sort of appears to me like it's not what I thought it was in 1975. So there's a kind of, I wouldn't say conspiracy, but the government is coming and going, leaks, giving us leaks and taking it back. You know, they just had this meeting in front of Congress that they said they had crash retrievals. And then if you look at Luis Elizondo lately, he says, no, we don't know if there's any crash retrievals. These means are ships that have landed and they back engineered. So they do have this technology. And if you read Colonel Corso's book, The Day After Roswell, he says microchips and all this advanced technology, even some of our cell phones that have now come out, are about these UFOs that they've back engineered to figure out how they work. Grant is in the next chapter. He says, this is the biggest story of all times, humanity meeting the other beings. That is going to change the world. And a lot of us have already met these beings. So I say making contact is really an inside job. We can't wait for the government to tell us it's a reality. We have to go out. I mean, we're meeting here today because we all know something is going on here. And it's like the veil between the dimensions are thinning, and we are about to meet these other beings on their terms, on how they think. And it's much more abstract and symbolic. We have to rise to the occasion and let go of the definitive ideas of how things are. I have a lecture I'm doing at Contact in the Desert that says there's a lot of quantum physics, consciousness, and UFOs create a triangulation of meaning, in the sense that
quantum physics comes down to the observer effect. What we think affects reality. And these beings, whoever they are maneuvering their craft in this quantum physics way to appear, disappear, move from place to place, move beyond time, because somehow they're able to use their mind to project a reality that they want. We have to get out of linear thinking. We have to think more abstractly, because when we're thinking linearly, you collapse the wave function. You say, this is it. If you're thinking abstractly, many possibilities exist at once. And when we learn the power of consciousness to manipulate those other realities, we will use the full capacity of our brain to move from here to there without shifts. We have this divine capacity as non-local beings to, I teach remote viewing, and everybody in the room can get the target just by extending the power of their brain to a non-local location. So we are much more vast and incredible and powerful than our education, our politics, our media, our religion has told us. And that is really what I think the whole UFO phenomenon is about. I start with the investigators, Nick Pope, Grant Cameron, and then I have JJ and Desiree Hurtak. They fill in after that. They talk about the ultra-celestials, the ultra-terrestrials.
In a new book by Alan Steinfeld called Making Contact, and Dr. Hurtak and I are one of the authors. And we talk about the fact that, well, okay, you can make contact with extraterrestrial vehicles physically that fly around like we see many times, and many people have seen over the years. But in actuality, there's also the idea of teleportation or quantum field teleportation, where you can be here and then you can be somewhere else. We know the universe is entangled. We know consciousness is a key. So all of this is really starting to expand our consciousness to even go beyond the physical flotsam and jetsam. And the idea that even now that's very prevalent, that extraterrestrial craft are not limited to the third/fourth dimensional reality, fourth dimension being time, but that they can work in fifth dimensional reality. So
this is what we say in chapter 3 of our contribution, that all of these discontinuities can be resolved by a higher consciousness physics that allows us to see we're not dealing with one extraterrestrial society, but several. And even beyond that, extracelestial and ultra-terrestrial that are in the consciousness or the pure form of evolution that do not need nuts and bolts. And so this is the big picture, as it were, the blueprint to the stars, the passport to the cosmos that we need as we wake up and smell the coffee, a higher consciousness that is more generous, and recognizing all members of the human society have had great traditions.
There are beings right here. That's why because are just vibrating at a faster rate. And some people can see them. Some people are awakened to that fact that they're here. We are part of the cosmos. I mean, I know we all think that, but when we go out, especially in Sedona at night, and we're going to do that tonight, we're going to have a CE5, CE6 led by Mark Sims. He's going to be talking later. We're all going to go out and we are going to call them in because they are waiting for us to start making contact. They really are. They're here and they welcome people who open their hearts and can drop the idea of that ego sense of self. This is really the level that we are all being called to. War and possessions, that's okay sometimes. But personalities, identification with the personality. There's a great joke in a book JJ wrote with Russell Targ. I love these jokes from the New Yorker. And it's about how attached we are to our personality. There's a guy at a bar, and he's yelling at the bartender, and he's saying, "Hey, buddy, you have no idea who I think I am." When we let go of that identification, we tap into the true essence of who we truly are. This is the work of the Hurtaks. They are teaching an expanded reality, and that's one of the reasons they're here in Sedona. They moved their headquarters because they know people are open to this now. So as we detach from the old identity, we start to embrace the more cosmic awareness and being that we really are. And then the fourth chapter is Linda Moulton Howe, who really is one of the experts in the field. She is one of the major, I would say she is the top researcher. Linda Moulton Howe, Contact in the Implicant Order. The Implicant Order is a David Bohm term in physics where everything is connected. The whole universe. You ever wonder why they call it the universe, the one verse? It is all one.
I have the fourth chapter, Contact in the Implicate Order, which is my way of saying that underneath everything, to the atoms, to the neutrinos, there is a fabric that ties everything at the deepest, deepest level together. And this is the very first time in my life that I ever talked about something that happened to me when I was in grade school and was playing in the backyard, going onto a handstand with my legs over a limb. And having done that, coming up from having been upside down for quite a while and looking at a full moon. And as I stared at that full moon, I was there. I was in it. And I knew the moon was hollow.
And she gave me a big push and put me at number one on Amazon through her Earth Files. From Linda, I go to John Mack. Do people know who John Mack is? John Mack was a Harvard psychiatrist. He had died about 20 years ago, but there was a speech he gave in 1995, and I found that, and I had it transcribed, or it was transcribed, but it's never been in print before. And it's a very contemporary understanding of abductions are real, they happen. He was a psychiatrist, he confirmed it. He's saying these people are not crazy. And Harvard tried to get rid of them because they said you can't say these people are not crazy. They obviously are. John says in this quote, he says, and I got off an old website from him. He says,
if something doesn't fit our notions of reality, and yet the people that are having an experience are of sound mind, are sincere, or nothing to gain, are in effect opening to other realities, then it seems to me the responsibility of academicians as well as theologians is to begin to question our notions of reality.
That's me and John hanging out for some coffee. This is a great quote from John that he uses in an essay. He says it's like an outreach program from the cosmos for the consciously impaired. That's us. That's why they're here. Really. We have to wake up our consciousness because
that camera says.
That's what they're all saying. It's time for us to wake up to some new realities. This is a great quote from John that he uses in an essay. He says, we're dealing with a phenomenon which violates our sense of reality, which operates in the gray area between the physical world and the subjective reality. We are being asked to prove this by methods of physical science alone. And those methods, in his view, will not yield its secrets until we discover other ways of knowing, other ways of thinking, other ways of being, abstract thought, the magic of creation. This is what the next level of reality that we're all on the threshold of. It is really exciting times as we go from one species into the next, as we really transform the active power in our DNA and ignite the biophotonic potential. We are becoming more light. We really are. So from John, I talked to Whitley Strieber, who's probably the most famous besides Travis, of course. Whitley's more an abductee. He didn't want to go. He didn't have it, he was taken, but he learned to make peace with this and start to evolve his consciousness to welcome these beings, to talk to them on their terms. His latest book was A New World, and this is something that Colonel Corso said to him. He says, these beings are saying, it's a new world if you can take it. That means if you can transcend the old dualities, the old identifications, and live into a new way. So Whitley, I have to say, is responsible for giving us this image of the grays. He was really the first to popularize this, and so many people have read this book and started to have memories of what was going on there. And this has become the icon of what we're seeing as ETs. I just talked to Grant Cameron, and he just said they may not be aliens. They may not be ETs. That shook me up. I said, I just wrote a book. You can't tell me that. But you know what? Maybe they're not ET. Maybe there's something that we have yet to imagine. Like in the 1800s, there were fairies and elves, and now there are ETs. But maybe we have yet to imagine what the next level of our own awakening will be. So that's what I talk about in my essay, Extraordinary Actualities, My Journey to the Stars. And I trace my obsession with science fiction, and then seeing Star Trek, wanting to be an astronaut. I knew that wasn't going to happen, but I did have this interesting abduction, and I never really talked about that. And so it's in this chapter. It's kind of typical, but it happened more in a dream state. So my theory is these beings don't appear in this reality. If they were to be here right on the stage with me right now, right there, maybe I think we would shift consciousness. It's a vibratory shift when they are in your space, and this happened to me. You sort of lose the linear sense of reality, and it's almost like you're drunk or high, or altered states. There's something that happens where they distort our field. Not because they want to, just because they're thinking on a different wavelength. So we have to become more lucid in our everyday interactions if we're really going to meet those beings on their terms. And that's why I talk about the practice of lucidity, dream time, really be conscious in your dream times, because they're talking to us from the level that they're at. It's like talking to a dog, You're not going to bark at them. You're going to talk to them in the more evolved language. So this is what I feel the ETs, this is part of making contact. So the Extraordinary Actualities was actually taken from this quote by Wallace Stevens. In the presence of extraordinary actuality, consciousness takes the place of imagination. That means when we're really present with these beings, for me, it means they're so far beyond what we can imagine. We have yet to really cognize the realities of ET contact, but we are on the threshold, like Travis said. That's why we need to practice being present, because the more present we are, the more we can interact with that other level of awakening. So extraordinary actualities, that's what's waiting for us. And that's what we have to go beyond what we can think it is in order to actually meet it for what it is, to be conscious. That's my feeling. And then my friend Henrietta does an essay on her remembrances, but in a kind of poetic, lyrical way, because if anyone's had contact, these islands of awareness stand out, and you may forget your dreams in the morning, but you never forget these experiences, right? How many people have had experiences here? Wow, I'm really talking to the choir. Yeah. So, no, it's true. So there's something different about what happens in those states of consciousness, and that's why I call it islands of awareness. And that's sort of what we have to all get used to. And then Darryl Anka, our favorite channel, Bashar, but he wrote a chapter as himself, as Darryl, and saying what he learned over these years of contact. 38 years with an ET's had this relationship, and it keeps getting better and better. So, relationships can get better and better over here. But he wrote a really great chapter as himself, and he doesn't, and 10 out of 11 essays in the book talk about telepathy. And Darryl and Bashar calls it telepathy. There's an empathic quality. So you're not really hearing someone's voices, you're feeling what they are and what they're experiencing. And when you do, you're syncing up your vibration. You're on the same wavelength.
As Bashar has sort of described it, and the reason that he refers to it as telepathy is, he's attempting to get us to understand that there is a different mechanical explanation for a lot of things that we consider to be metaphysical experiences, rather than the older, outdated definitions. For example, most people would think that telepathy means that we're reading someone else's mind. What Bashar is basically saying is that's not really mechanically what's happening. What's happening is you are getting your own energy to be sort of on a similar wavelength with someone else. And therefore, when you're on a similar wavelength, you actually have the same thoughts at the same time, because that's the thought that goes with that frequency. So basically, you're reading your own mind, but synchronistically, you happen to know exactly what the other person is thinking. And this is why it's telepathy, because you see this example all the time with people who are in love with one another. Because that vibration, that similar harmonic resonance between those people allow them to really be on the same wavelength. And very often you'll see that people who are in love, they know exactly what each other is thinking. They finish each other's sentences. They hardly have to say a word to know what the other person is thinking. But that's just because they're having the same thought at the same time, because they're on the same frequency. So really the idea is the more in love we are with each other, the more telepathic we will naturally become.
Henrietta, why don't you tell Darryl what happened when you were reading his chapter in the book? Because I think that's a great place to start.
Okay, good. Well, hi, everyone. Yeah, so obviously I read Alan's book, which is really fantastic, by the way. You know, it really, like he says, leads you through a progression of so many different parts of the story, like pieces of the puzzle around UFO and abduction experiences, what they might signify. And I loved every essay in there, but I read Darryl's and then, and I loved that. And then I went to sleep and I had a dream, which was one of those dreams which was very unlike any other dream I'd ever had. I've only had a few, which felt like I'd literally gone into another world, which was very brightly colored, the sort of saturated colors, which I'd never experienced in a dream. And it was kind of reminded me a bit of Blade Runner, but a lot more sort of joyful, you know, that kind of landscape. Yeah, no, but there's sort of lots of, you know, like a super futuristic, but also things that I didn't recognize. It felt like I was at home, but I also wasn't me as a human. I was like just a form of intelligence. But the whole experience, the whole dream felt kind of joyous and adventurous, but I was in a completely different world. And I'd never had a dream like that before. And I told Alan and he said, well, I think, you know, that has something to do with the fact you read the essay. Yeah.
But thank you. First of all, Henrietta, that's really cool that you had that. A lot of times when people are presented with certain concepts that Bashar has brought through, there's a particular frequency to them that is a very high frequency that often people do report that once they're exposed to it, it does shift them somewhat into a slightly altered version of reality. And that can sometimes easily present itself in dreams when our conscious mind is out of the way. So I think what you were kind of experiencing, not that Bashar's world looks like what you describe, but certainly the energy, the joyous energy is what I experience all the time when he comes through me, because they're just high on life. I mean, it's just not any shadow in there at all in terms of their experience. And so if any of that sort of rubbed off on your consciousness during that particular chapter, that's great. That's a wonderful thing. And thank you for sharing that with me.
And from Darryl, we go to Mary Rodwell. She talks to a lot of the Starseeds, and we're actually going to have a Starseed here talking with us, Bridget Nielsen. She did a lot of Starseed work. But Mary's been around the world and talked to kids 5 or 6 years old, remembering their coming from another star system and the messages of cleaning up our planet and awakening to new ways of using our consciousness, new ways of exchange, and new ways of living with each other that we have yet to really take on. So Mary writes a great chapter there. And then he finished this interview with Carolyn Cory, and she talks about ET lineages. So she says it's important to know the star systems, because when you do, because we've all come from someplace else, when you do, you sort of bring the gifts of those stars here, that system here. You expand humanity. And that's really what we're here to do. We're here not to really leave the earth, but we're here to awaken the earth to what's possible. This is the time, I think, in history where they're going to say, wow, a lot of those people woke up together. They woke up to bring in these new realities and new possibilities. And we are the ones that are really going to change the consciousness out here. And we are the ones that are really going to start to make contact. And we are making it now. And thank you all. And I'll bring up my next guest. So thank you.